But yeah, okay. So welcome everyone to the fourth event in the DSA Funds series, How We Win. This series focuses on sharing lessons and how to experience from local policy campaigns and organizing around the country, and discussing how democratic socialist organizers and coalitions can advance and achieve tangible wins that support our economic and social goals. And tonight's event is co-sponsored by Dissent Magazine, In These Times, Jacobin, and the DSA National Electoral Committee. Tonight, we'll get an inside look at organizers and public officials working to win policy change in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and New York City. 100 years ago, these cities were centers of power for the Socialist Party of America. A century after socialist and labor organizers used mass politics to secure wins for working class people, both cities have sent socialist caucuses to their respective state capitals. With political power behind the push for reforms, organizers can have a stronger platform to achieve policy wins. How can organizers and public officials harness our collective power and leverage the public policy process to advance socialist goals? Our panelists will talk about strategies that have worked, challenges and obstacles along the way, and the path forward to build strong governing coalitions between local organizers and public officials. First, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Anna Dvorak, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. I'm also a panelist, so I'll be multitasking here. I have, just quickly, I'll introduce myself. I've been organizing workers in Wisconsin for over a decade for climate justice and immigrant and worker rights. I'm currently organizing to build a mass movement for socialism as the co-chair of the Milwaukee DSA. And then I also work as staff for the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, which is the union that represents most Milwaukee public school education workers. And then I will, all right, I'm gonna move on to introduce our other awesome panelists here. First off, we have Karen Narefsky. Karen is a New York City resident and a 10-year member of DSA. She has worked as a housing and community organizer in Massachusetts and New York. She is currently the chief of staff for Assemblymember Farah Souffrant-Forrest, a DSA member and former nurse who represents the Brooklyn neighborhoods of Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, and Crown Heights. Next, we have Assemblymember Zohran Kwame Mamdani, who represents the 36th Assembly District and its neighborhoods of Astoria and Long Island City. Previously a foreclosure prevention housing counselor, Zohran is the first South Asian man and first Ugandan to serve in the New York State Assembly. Next, we have Assemblymember Darren Madison Jr., a Milwaukee native and dedicated activist who joined Urban Underground at a young age, protesting against the 2011 Wisconsin Act 10 and advocating for social justice and youth power. There, he focused on issues like youth jobs, public safety, sexual health, and environmental justice, and he gained experience in various political campaigns. He now represents Wisconsin's 10th Assembly District and has contributed as an AmeriCorps Public Allies Volunteer Coordinator at the Urban Ecology Center as program manager, and also as program manager at the Environmental Collaboration Office, and as a lobbyist / abolitionist with Youth Justice Milwaukee. Last but not least, we have Assemblymember Ryan Clancy, who represents Wisconsin's 19th State Assembly District, and who is also a member of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. A dedicated socialist, Ryan was the first in Milwaukee since 1956. Ryan has a history of activism, from the Peace Corps to protesting for immigrant rights. He volunteered with disaster relief organizations, taught for Milwaukee public schools, and co-owns a community-centered business. Ryan also founded the Progressive Restaurant and Activists of Wisconsin Network, advocating for better working conditions in the service industry. For the first half of our discussion, we'll center, or the first half of our discussion, I should say, We'll center on questions I ask the panelists as a moderator. And in the second half, panelists will answer questions from you all, the attendees. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to post your questions as they come to you throughout the discussion today. So I'll go ahead and ask the first question here. And just a heads up, Karen, I'm going to call on you first to respond. So the idea behind how we win is that building working class power requires not just organizing in our communities, but also following through on policy adoption and implementation. Reflecting on your own communities, what strategies have been most effective in building working class power through collaboration between democratic socialist organizers and elected officials, and how can these be replicated and adapted in other contexts? So like I said, I'm going to pick on you first, Karen. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks so much, Anna. And thanks everyone for being here. I have to shout out some of, I was going through the participants and I saw actually some of the members of our New York State Socialists and Office Committee from Mid-Hudson Valley. It was great to see you guys. And I also saw my comrade, Mary Jo from Boston. So I'm really happy to see you on here. Hi, Mary Jo. And it's really great to be part of this discussion. So as as Anna mentioned, for the last year or so, I've been serving as chief of staff for one of our DSA elected officials in New York State, Assembly Member Farah Souffrant-Forrest. And, I think part of what Zohran and I are going to talk about is the really kind of exciting and successful Socialists in Office Committee that we've built and are building in New York State. And we really want to use that committee to be able to both organize in our districts and in the legislature, and to really push socialist policy as much as we can at the state level. So I feel like there's sort of two strategies that that we're always looking at and thinking about. So one is having socialist elected officials use their platform to actually build new working class organizations. And then the other one is that socialist elected officials are using their platform to elevate existing working class organizations, whether those are labor unions or tenant organizations or other working class formations. So obviously it's a little easier to support an existing organization than to create one from scratch. So I think that's where a lot of folks have started. And so, we've really done it very successfully. I think in New York, we've supported and uplifted in the district that I work in a lot of tenant organizations, and really worked closely with tenants to turn their individual struggles into kind of statewide policy struggles. Zohran's office has worked really closely with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, taxi drivers who have been organizing for better economic conditions. And so we've really worked hard to do that in New York. And so I think there's a few strategies that we've used. We promote people's organizing work through our campaign channels. We sort of use the presence of an elected official to draw membership to an organization and potential press coverage to those struggles. And I think it's really important to actually develop strong relationships between the elected officials and the members and staff of the organizations that we're working with. So it's not just showing up at an event or retweeting a tweet. It's actually building human connections so we can kind of rely on and support each other. And it leads to these interesting questions too about what really is a working class organization. And so I think that, people may, I think there's some types of organizations that really obviously fit the model, and some that maybe people would disagree. And so we've created the space to sort of have that discussion. And, before I pass it on to other folks to respond, I just wanted to talk a little bit about something that we're hoping to do within Farah's office, the office that I work in, which is to really actually use the office to try to create a group of residents in the district who are excited to become organizers and to, to really build their knowledge and skills with our office. And so I don't know that I would necessarily call it a new organization, but we really want to bring people together through our office, train them as organizers, and get them to think of themselves as kind of both part of our office and part of the Socialist Project. And so I think that's also a way that we can, use the platform that folks have as socialist elected officials to really try to build new formations in addition to uplifting the organizing that's already happening in the districts.
Thanks so much, Karen. I love what you said about building human connection and relationships and between electeds and members or constituents in the community. I think that sometimes people can sort of put elected officials on sort of a pedestal and not really see that they're just people. So yeah, that's awesome. All right, next up, I'm going to call on Zohran. Zohran, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I first of all just want to say it is such a pleasure to be here. And I also want to explain that the only reason I will continue to eat off camera is because it's Ramadan and I'm just breaking my fast. I think I really want to first echo what Karen has been saying and really shine a light on Farah's office as a very exciting model for a lot of the organizing that happens in district. So much of our hope is that we create organizing that lives beyond us as elected officials and even beyond our office, and empowers individuals in the district to organize and better their own conditions. We have in our office have sought to do a similar thing through the creation of a constituent services team where we can empower people to come and help resolve other constituents' issues that they're facing in the district. But I think the key is beyond individual cases one by one, is rather through that's organizing that goes beyond that, organizing that takes its shape in tenant organizing that's occurring or in union organizing. And one of the really exciting things is also the connection between our offices and the organization of DSA at large, because we're trying to, our understanding of socialism is also that the extension of democracy beyond the ballot box, giving people the ability to control their own lives and their own work conditions. And I think that the core of that comes from that organizing. So I just wanted to not take up too much time, but just add that in there.
Thanks, Zohran. I love what you said about creating an organization or organizers basically in your district that lives beyond your own time in office. That's great and is really movement centered. So thank you for that. Next, I'm going to call on Darren. Go ahead, Darren.
I'm answering what? I got disconnected. I just got back.
Yeah, absolutely. I can reread the question quickly. So let's see here. So the idea behind how we win is that building working class power requires not just organizing in our communities, but also follow through on policy adoption and implementation. So reflecting on your own communities, what strategies have been most effective in building working class power through collaboration between democratic socialist organizers and elected officials, and how can these be replicated or adapted to other contexts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that DSA Milwaukee and what we've been able to do as a socialist caucus is be able to work directly and collaboratively as it relates to our policy agenda and uplifting the fights that are happening directly in the city of Milwaukee and transferring that to the fights that we're having in the legislature. For example, I know, Anna, you've done a lot of work as it relates to our Power to the People campaign, which is taking on our electrical utility private monopoly, We Energies, and that is the fight the way that DSA has been strategizing with communities in Milwaukee.
I think the capitalist class got to Darren.
Oh no. He is literally in the Capitol, the state Capitol right now.
In building, again,
Got him back.
Hey,
Darren.
Darren. Darren, you cut out for maybe the last 20 or 30 seconds. Sorry.
Got you.
I think you were talking about power to the people and then yeah.
Got you. What was the last thing that you heard? I'm so sorry.
It was something about power to the people. I don't totally remember.
Got you. So the Power to the People campaign, which Milwaukee DSA has been leading alongside other community-based organizations as it relates to what does it look like for the city of Milwaukee to reclaim our utilities and start a municipal-owned utility. Has been an effort that's been happening at the local level, but has been guiding the same way we shape and strategize as it relates to what we can do to hold We Energies accountable at the state level. Our legislative Black caucus has met with all of the utilities, both public and private, throughout the state of Wisconsin. And one of the big things that I uplifted as related to the equity for Black and Brown communities when I was in that meeting was that we need access to the ability to regulate our utilities, and if they won't give us that power, we'll reclaim it ourselves. That level of guidance and learning from directly engaging with, again, the Power to the People campaign, again, guides the work that we do at the state. There's so many fights that we've been engaged in thus far, even though we're only a little bit over 100 days in the game for both me and Ryan Clancy, our Representative Clancy. We've been able to do so much and so much effectively as a very small and new office, because we both only have one staffer. The only reason why we're able to do so much more is because we have the support of DSA members in our strategic planning and taking action.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, I love what you talked about, directly engaging DSA campaigns and how you're using that. I know you just got sworn in a couple months ago, but you're already sort of advancing like sort of socialist policy, or doing your best to do so in a very dark, grim place like the extremely partisan gerrymandered Wisconsin state legislature. So thank you. Next, we'll hear from your office mate or roommate, Ryan Clancy, at the Wisconsin State Capitol. Ryan, do you want to take a stab at answering this question?
Thanks, Allie. Yeah, and I don't have that much to add. I mean, I think the brilliant folks before me really put it well. I do want to lift up even how the folks on this call are talking about the office in a way that other folks don't. And everybody here has used the term "our office," whether it's staff or the elected. And yeah, I'm really blessed that the Republicans at the state level for us did not assign the folks across the aisle enough offices to go around. Darren and I literally get to share an office, and we get to share staff. And what that means is that we get to punch above our weight because we have a caucus of essentially 4 people. It's Darren and myself, and then Amelia and David, who are our DSA member, brilliant staffers, and who are every bit as much as vital to what we do as we are. And I think that really speaks to the potential to have socialists in office. I mean, Darren and I are the first people in this house for many decades, and that carries with it a fair amount of pressure, but there's also a ton of potential there. And I think everything that we do is under a lot more scrutiny. Is whether it's how we structure our offices, it's the relationships with our staff, it's the relationships with the community, it's the accountability, the standards that we hold ourselves to. And I think that's really something that I didn't realize when we stepped into this office, but it allows us to punch above our weight, and people are noticing. And it's boy, it's exhausting sometimes, but I love it and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And getting us in a lot of trouble, which we good trouble nonetheless.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so I'll just chime in here because I am also a panelist and a moderator. So I'm an organizer. I come from it from that angle rather than more so policy or as an elected. And what I've seen in my years organizing in Wisconsin is that it's just a very different political landscape than in New York City. We, like I said, have a very gerrymandered state legislature, and it's just been a very challenging past decade and a half, where we've seen public sector unions destroyed basically with Act 10, and then right to work with private sector. So that is basically a shadow of what it once was. Anything we've been, any progressive legislation at the local level oftentimes is preempted by the state. So such as raising the minimum wage, it's still $7.25 an hour in Wisconsin. And also, like paid family leave. I know that we tried to advance that at a local level. So we in Wisconsin are, we just elected 2 state representatives, Darren and Ryan. And I think as a chapter, we're starting to just like really figure out how to make this work effectively, and how to relate to them at the state level. And so, one of the things, as Darren mentioned, we have one of our campaigns is Power to the People, to turn our private utility into a public utility. We also have a lot of work in the sort of abolition space and trying to stop a youth prison being built in the city of Milwaukee. So I think that, I'm excited to personally learn from some of our comrades in New York tonight. And continue to figure that out. Okay, so I'm gonna shift to the next question now. Thanks, everyone. So question 2 is, and Zohran, I'm gonna call on you first, so heads up on that. But how do structures created by DSA chapters and public officials in your local area work to complement official staff lines provided by the state? So in terms of policy research for legislation and implementation, please address that. So policy research for implementation and legislation, and then also for community organizing that builds cohesiveness and pressure for policy goals. Go ahead,
thank you
Zohran.
very much for the question. I would say that without DSA, I feel like I would have maybe less than 50% of the capacity that I have as an elected official and that my office has. And that's probably a conservative estimate. What I've seen in Albany, where both Karen and I work for much of the time, is a long history of skeletal investment in the public good, both in terms of investments in the budget, but also in terms of what payroll allocations are for individual legislators and what kind of services you're able to provide as a result of that. There have been many steps recently towards increasing that. But right now, and I'm hesitant to complain because I don't know what it is in Wisconsin. It may be worse. But we get $220,000 for staff payroll. And we want to be able to pay people an actual living wage. And so what that means is looking at having, 3 full-time members in our office to serve more than 130,000 people, 1 part-time person. And yet, while that is such beautiful capacity that we have 3.5 people and go through the bill and that they vote on every single day, they would be unable, and it would be completely impossible in part for what we have here in our New York City chapter, which is something called the Legislative Analysis Team. And they will go through all of the bills that could be flagged for us to vote on. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm seeing that my audio is doing something crazy. Can people hear me?
We can hear you now. you just sounded a little robotic before, and it was a little hard to understand you. So maybe if you could rewind like 30 seconds.
Is this better now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The basic point I was trying to hammer home is that we get $220,000 for payroll. We can hire about 3.5 people, and those are 3.5 people who can do incredible work. But there's so much more work to be done, both to fulfill the basic necessities of the position, as well as expanding the political imagination of constituents and everyone else in New York State. And so that's DSA really steps in to provide that kind of institutional support. One key thing is the legislative analysis team reads through all of the bills that could potentially be voted on, flagging which bills are in contradiction with our values. That is something that is such a clear addition to the work that we do. The other thing is, Socialists in Office, which I really thought we would have come up with a catchier name by now, but that is the name that we have for our committee. We meet every Friday, and we have this 1.5-hour meeting, and within that meeting and within that committee, there's so much support that is provided to the elected officials, without which I really just don't see this work as being possible. So I would say that the work is, the assistance is necessary, it's critical, and if there's anything that you've ever liked seeing a New York City DSA elected official do, know that the organization and the chapter at large had everything to do with making that even possible. I don't know, Ramadan has my brain just completely melted.
No problem. Continue eating, please. Okay. All right. Next, I'm going to pick on Darren. Darren, would you like to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, can you repeat the question one more time?
I'd love to. Okay, so I have so many tabs. Okay, so how do structures created by DSA chapters and public officials in your local area work to complement official staff lines provided by the state?
Gotcha.
So in terms of policy research for legislation and implementation, and also or for community organizing that builds cohesiveness and pressure for policy goals.
Got you. What I actually want to do is can we pass it to Ryan first so we can talk about what's been done at the county level, and then I can talk about the state level, because there's been a lot happening there.
Absolutely. And just to remind everyone, Ryan is both a Milwaukee County supervisor and a state assembly representative. So he currently holds 2 elected offices. So Ryan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And the headlines in Milwaukee will tell you that I'm a double dipping socialist. So it's a really great, I think, ice cream social fundraiser idea, but it's been good. I've been doing 2 jobs, looking forward to having one soon. And yeah, the DSA has been absolutely invaluable. I mean, and then it's the working groups within Milwaukee's DSA are really, really good. They know policy really well. And it's amazing because you can have folks, working with you on doing the research and understanding what your priorities should be. And then when those same folks show up to give testimony in committee, it's invaluable. And it absolutely flips my colleagues. We've had a ton of policy wins from that strategy specifically. Milwaukee DSA's abolition working group, for instance, has helped me move millions of dollars away from the sheriff's budget over the last couple of budgets. And it's been great because when that happens, you're then able to point to the things that we were able to build with those dollars, like playgrounds, like infrastructure. And that's not only a policy win, but that's a win for socialism. Like every time we have kids playing on the South Shore playground, we're going to say, this was a win, that the DSA owns, that socialism owns. This is what our community could look like if we had more of that and more folks in office, willing to be bold and make those moves of those dollars. And then with that support comes accountability. So, when folks are really invested in policy, if you step out of line as an elected, the idea is that they keep track of our work and they're able to not only support us, but really hold us accountable to that work. And it's been awesome to see at the county. Darren, I'm going to pass it over to you, but I hope you can talk about paid interns as well, if you want to take on the state part.
I got you. If that's okay with Anna. If you don't want to.
Yeah, please go ahead, Darren.
Got you. So to pick on Zohran a little bit, we don't have the sweet luxury of having multiple staff and paying them with a budget of $120,000. We have an office, we only get an office budget and it's $20,000. Most of that goes to one singular mailer or two mailers we can send out, for every one of the 2 years, one each year. Additionally, both of our staffers are paid under $50,000. Most staffers only cross that threshold when they've worked for the state legislature for 6, 7, 8 years. And the only way that they can cross that threshold is if they quit working for the office that they work for and they apply at a different office later. So there's a give and take there. Unless you're in the state Senate, you're not winning in terms of staff. Which is why the collaboration between our offices is so essential. Also, we are 2 votes away from a supermajority in the state of Wisconsin in totality. And those two seats are in the assembly. So a lot of what we can do is only mitigation from the harm of some really heinous bills. The ways in which we collaborated with the caucus with the Milwaukee DSA and DSA chapters throughout Wisconsin has lately been specifically as it relates to a constitutional bail amendment, which has passed and grossly increases the impacts of the carceral state, especially on Black and brown folks, before they are they are found guilty of a crime. Me and Ryan came into this work and we came into this office, and that was the first bill in our first session that we had to have conversations about, and nobody else in our caucus was prepared to handle that fight. We as a freshman office carried that fight and moved so many votes from voting in our caucus, from voting for this piece of legislation to against, but we sadly came short. But we were able to move so many folks because we built a coalition of partners that was led by DSA Milwaukee members, to combat this legislation. And we, held a press conference to offer an alternative pathway forward. Sadly, we didn't win that fight, but it showed folks that we as socialists aren't going to sit on our hands, especially when working class citizens are being harmed and consistently left behind, especially marginalized communities. And you're right, there's a pathway for us to still win. I always appreciate Ryan's optimism. Additionally, folks are trying to have us have unpaid interns here in our state office, and we do have one. And that's on my, because I fought for that intern, and they actively wanted to work in our office, regardless of the dynamic. But we're making sure that they can have access to paid opportunities outside of our space. But we are fighting to get paid interns here in the state of Wisconsin. And Ryan has been carrying that mantle so that we can funnel the opportunity to engage in our legislature in a symbiotic sense, as opposed to a parasitic sense, more effectively. I know I went around and talked about a lot of things, but I wanted to cover quite a few points.
Thanks, Darren. I'll take a stab at this next, and then Karen will have you last, but not least. So yeah, I think just sort of building off of what Ryan and Darren said, I think that, and I was actually just having a conversation with, we have another Milwaukee socialist elected who just got elected in early April, Missy Zombor, to the citywide seat at the Milwaukee Public School Board. And I was talking to her the other night, and we were just sort of, in terms of advancing the type of, Ryan talked about some like concrete things that we were able to accomplish, at the county level, which is great. But in terms of accomplishing like the radical structural change that we know our communities need, requires like getting back to basics and organizing a mass movement of working people in our state. I mean, we're located in Milwaukee, so we're really focused on Milwaukee, but it's the largest city in the state. And so that's why, you know, I'll speak to Power to the People because that's the campaign that I work with closely, but I know that other campaigns in our DSA chapter are working on this too. But that's why we are canvassing every weekend and talking to, like, we're, you know, standing outside Walmarts and grocery stores and just talking to regular people who may not even consider themselves to be political, may not even know that having a public utility is an option. And knowing that, you know, our elected officials could choose to do this. So just sort of like, you know, having those organizing conversations and building up the movement that is going to have the backs of our electeds when they stick their necks out and take a political risk to stand up for something that's actually going to materially benefit the working class. So I know that's been like, that's just crucial in a state like Wisconsin, where, you know, it is so hostile to any sort of progressive, any legislation that could be considered left of center, be it socialist, progressive, liberal, whatever. So I'll end with that and hand it over to Karen. Karen, go ahead.
Great. So yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with everything that Zohran said earlier about like the way that our sort of the relationship between DSA as an organization and the socialists in office really acts as like this incredible force multiplier. I liked what you said, Darren, about it being a symbiotic relationship, not a parasitic relationship. And it's like, you know, as a staffer, there's so much that we want to do. And like everyone in my office works incredibly hard. And there's just like so much that can't be done just because of capacity. And so like the legislative analysis work is really awesome. The only other thing that I wanted to say is like a big way I think that, you know, DSA helps to amplify the power of the elected officials is, and actually helps the elected officials help each other, is through information. So New York's like a blue state, whatever, but it's a state that operates on secrecy and rumors and exclusion. And all of our socialist elected officials have come into a space where they're not welcome. Many of them ran against longtime incumbents. And most of the staff, you know, in our office, most of the staff are like DSA members who didn't work in any other elected official's office before. So we don't have like, you know, 20 years of experience on like how to get stuff done in Albany. And I think it's been really helpful to have a space where activists and elected officials can just talk to each other and say like, hey, I heard this. What do you think? Does that make sense? Oh, I heard the opposite. Okay, what's going on here? Just like information sharing. You know, and some of the folks within our local chapter also are active in state politics and have certain relationships and can share that information. But just having a space to talk to other ideologically aligned people and like kind of check the information that you have and strategize together and say like, okay, here's what we think is going on. You know, like tomorrow you do this, I'll do that, and then we'll come back and see what happened. It's really powerful, and it's like is unique for legislators to actually see themselves as organizers and be trying to operate that way within the legislature.
Thanks, Karen. So just to sort of recap some like ideas that I heard. So I heard Zohran talk about how like the DSA chapter there supports you in creating like a legislative team, just like sifting through and flagging bills that are against your values. That's a really cool idea that seems to be working. For Ryan, you know, having folks in DSA chapters researching and testifying when need be. And then Darren, you know, you specifically talked about how staffing capacity is low. And so how collaboration between you and Ryan is really important. And then between, other coalition partners, depending on the issue, and the need for, to actually pay your staff a living wage. That's real. And then Karen, just elected officials sharing information and things like that. Thank you all for those answers. Next, we'll move on to the third question here. And Darren, I'm going to pick on you first. So heads up, fair warning. So how can we evaluate the impact of our policy proposals in terms of immediate outcomes and then also long-term systemic change? So from legislators and organizers' perspectives alike, how can we use these evaluations to refine tactics, celebrate successes, learn from setbacks, and build stronger coalitions? So Darren, do you want to take a stab?
Absolutely. I wish my staffer was here because David is literally a genius and could tell. We literally spent the past 2 hours talking about how do we evaluate our success as a collective socialist caucus in office and plan with the weird amount of time that we have left. Because I know, next year a lot of our time will be spent outside of the office instead of inside the office. But this is how I see things, right? One, and I can use the constitutional bail amendment fight as an example, because since that's our most recent one. Where did folks stand at the beginning of that fight as it relates to this issue, and how have they shifted thus far in that fight? Two, who's at the table and actively opposing it now versus when at the beginning of that, when we started organizing as it relates to this issue. Three, how has this raised class consciousness? At the end of it, when I think about any issue in any effort that we put towards the work that we do, is how have we raised class consciousness as it relates to the political process, as it relates to how to hold elected officials accountable, how to reclaim power, and how to actively be true participants in our democracy, and seeing how that shift has happened over time. And right now, we've done, it feels like I constantly feel like we haven't done enough. But the reality is we've done so much as a team of four with the amount of allies that we've been able to establish, to the point that, like, when we first walked into this space, first walked into the legislature, folks were like, we don't know how to interact with these socialists. We don't even know who they are. Now we're both the bad kids in the classroom and the cool kids that everybody wants to consult when they want to be close to progressive values and doing the right thing. We are a lot of folks' moral compass as it relates to fighting for the values of the working class. And I see it all the time when I get messages from colleagues or folks stop in my office wanting to have deeper conversations about how to approach strategic change. How that transfers to our broader community. I see it in the amount of young people in my district that have been advocating for free school meals for all, and ending their school's contract with Ryan, what is the name of the entity that has a contract with
Aramark?
Say it one more time.
Aramark,
which has a contract with Milwaukee County's jail to provide very crappy meals for everyone in their care. And they're doing that in one of the schools in my district. And young people are actively opposing this at ages 13, 12, 11, because there's middle schoolers doing this work too, and high schoolers, right? That's raising class consciousness. That's building a next generation of leaders actively changing our society. And that's building a broader socialist movement. I think my district has probably one of the coolest youth DSA chapters in the country. I'm gonna claim that. Because they're freaking amazing.
Thanks, Darren. Next up, we have Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan.
I got to stop following Darren because he took all my answers. They were great. And it would have been really easy to walk into the assembly and avoid the fight about cash bail expansion, right? I mean, in 2023, everybody wants to talk about public safety. It was a fight that I think ended up making us have a reputation for being willing to take on those fights and being willing to do the right thing even when some people don't think it's the right thing to do. It gave us a reputation that we want to have conversations about, is this piece of legislation the right thing to do, not is it politically expedient. And it also pissed a lot of people off, but I think we went into this fight not assuming that we would have a narrow policy victory, but often these fights don't look like short-term victories. They're really part of a longer-term campaign, and they don't make us friends everywhere. Yeah, I think those are often the most important fights to have, and I'm glad that we have had that, and then we continue to make that part of a larger campaign. And to present, I think, as socialists, and this is really important, a different vision, because we could have leaned back. Cash bail would have passed without really any discussion. The fact that we had that fight lets people know across the state, because it was on the ballot statewide, that there is a different way to do things, even if it didn't pass yet.
Thanks, Ryan.
I appreciate here that Darren has our foam board that he's not very discreetly putting in the back here, so we can see the just part of the large coalition that we put together and the alternative. Darren is literally showing us the alternative to cash bail expansion.
Thanks, Darren. I wish we could see that more closely, but appreciate the props that you brought with you. Yeah, so I'll go next, and then we'll go to Karen and Zohran. What in terms of just sort of measuring like our impact, both short and long term, I like to think about sort of like, I think it's important actually, and we should probably do this more in Milwaukee, of like identifying goals on the front end in terms of, what are our goals for our specific campaigns or electoral campaigns. So for electoral, it's pretty straightforward, like let's win, right? But like for every single campaign, whether it's electoral or issue based, thinking through like how are we building our broader movement for socialism. So whether that could be measured by the number of email addresses we collect, or contact information we collect, number of one-on-ones we have with people in the community. It could be membership. How did this campaign grow DSA membership? And paying attention to that. I think that's something that would be really beneficial to focus on, because, to harken back on what our comrade Zohran said in the first question, is we're trying to build something that lives beyond us, right? Like this is a long-term battle for socialism. And so we should be thinking about how we're building power over the long term. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that then. Karen, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I actually am going to drop something in the chat. I wanted to share like a framework. Oh, it's not going to be formatted the way I want. Let me see if I can fix it while I'm talking. So basically, like we have this framework that we have discussed a lot within our like Socialist in Office committee that I really like for actually looking at legislation. So whether it's like, as legislators, like people get asked to co-sponsor other people's legislation, and there's like tons and tons of bills all the time. Most of them are like basically fine, but not very impactful. Some of them you're like, how is this not already the law? Why does this even have to be voted on? And then a few of them are really awesome, and a few of them are really terrible. So there's just like a lot of noise out there, but I think both when we're looking at other people's legislation and trying to like see which bills it makes sense for socialist elected officials to put their name on, but also more importantly, when our socialist elected officials are actually writing and introducing legislation, we have like a framework that we have talked about to try to like figure out if something is socialist legislation. Because there's a lot out there that is good and fine, and we'd be happy if it passed, but it doesn't necessarily fit into the framework of what we're trying to do as socialists. So it did kind of work, the format. So basically, this is like these are the questions that we're supposed to be trying to ask ourselves, right? So if we're working on a piece of legislation, like, does it decommodify labor? Does it make people less dependent on their jobs for survival? So like, whether it's increasing wages, whether it's providing universal health care so that people don't have to depend on their jobs for health insurance, et cetera. Does it institutionalize solidarity? This means basically, is it a universal program? Are we creating like cross-class alliances by passing this thing, or are we like pitting the people who are just below the eligibility threshold against the people who are just above it? Does it like control the economic cycle? Does it reduce the power of corporations and redistribute profit? Does it create a positive role for the state? So most people's interactions with the state, and by the state, I don't mean like the state of New York, but like government, are really negative. And so people think that the state government is terrible because all of their interactions with the state are like really bad. They're getting poor services, they're being denied benefits, they're not getting the investments that they deserve. So we want legislation that actually creates a positive role for the state in people's lives. We want to establish decision-making and ownership for working people in how this legislation gets implemented. And we also want it to be legislation that helps end the carceral state, that takes people out of prisons and jails and creates alternatives to our carceral system. So I can't think of any bills that do all of these things, but if we're working on a piece of legislation and we see that it does like one or two, that's a good sign, and it's something that we try to use as like an internal rubric, I think, to think about whether we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Karen. So last but not least, Zohran, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that listening to Darren and Ryan, you, Anna, it is so exciting to just hear about the work that is going on elsewhere, and that we're all part of the same organization. And just sincerely, it's really, really exciting to hear about it, because it is so easy to get lost in Albany and to get lost in New York City and to think that these are the only fights that exist, and if we don't do it, then no one else will. And then all of a sudden you hear they're having the same cash bail fight in Wisconsin, and we know that socialists are holding the line over there, and socialists are expanding the political imagination. And Karen sharing the framework here, and then maybe you can use the framework there. It really is the dream to hear about it. And Darren's also taught me to never complain about a 220,000 staff payroll allocation ever again in the future. Though I feel like there can be common cause between assembly members across states that senators have it easier wherever they may be. So I think we can, assembly members of the world, unite. We have nothing to lose but our chains and our friendships with senators. Anyway, to the question as it was originally stated, I think, I really love the framework that Karen shared. It's very helpful because I think noise is such a great way of describing just how many pieces of legislation come across our desk, and that we vote on as well. The other thing I would just say, like, peeling away from theoretical and more in terms of if and when we win, does it have an impact on working people such that they know that the fight even took place or that it was worth having? And this kind of goes back to the first question about implementation. One of the fights that I've been the most privileged to be a part of is the fight that Karen alluded to in her first answer about with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance for debt relief for working class taxi drivers. We won after many months, which was already built upon years of organizing by the union, many months of protests, press conferences, arrests, and then culminating, I was part of a 15-day hunger strike. We won a landmark agreement from the city that they would give a guarantee to every single one of these loans, that they would guarantee these loans. So if any driver's loan failed, the city would step in and the lender wouldn't be able to possess the driver's home, the driver's other assets, which they had typically been doing. And it was a day of euphoria. And then the important thing was, over the next 8-9 months, as we fought to actually implement that deal, to ensure that we did not take our eye off the ball. And I'm really excited to say that we got to the point where, implementation was imminent, and the union called us up and they said, we need to let all of the eligible drivers know that this deal is about to open and they need to come and close it. And so we actually used, AOC agreed to let us use her campaign dialer that we then used to call, thousands of drivers to let them know about this agreement that we had won 10 months ago. And we managed to sign up so many people to receive that which they were due. And since the program launched, we have secured more than $300 million in debt relief. And to me, I think it not only fits these frameworks, but it also, for these drivers, their lives have forever been changed. And they have been enrolled into a program that gives them the security and peace of mind that they know they can finally get out from debt peonage. And for the drivers that we worked with that were in that hunger strike, and the union members that saw not just myself, but countless DSA members come on that strike and be part of those rallies, they know that it was socialists who were there with them to win that victory. And I think that that's critical in us making it clear to people that where capital leaves people behind, socialists link arms and get working people across the finish line.
Wow, I'm speechless. That was beautiful. I really just appreciate what everyone contributed to this question. There were like some really concrete things that I'm definitely going to take back and like use in my own chapter, and I hope folks on the call did too. Okay, so we're actually over time on the panel section, but I want to just do one more sort of rapid fire question for everyone. So what advice do you have for organizers looking to build power with folks in office? So I'm gonna pick on Ryan Clancy first. Ryan, do you need me to repeat the question, or are you good to go?
No, I'm just going to shoot from the hip on this one. And I was going to talk about what I was going to talk about anyway, which is answer the question you want to be asked, right? So, and I think looking for those local policy victories is really key. And I think I'm able, and we're able to pull people into socialism by reminding them that the best policies are socialist. At the county level, I was able to make Milwaukee County the first county in 2021 to provide the right to counsel for folks facing eviction. It's been huge, and people sort of knew that it was good and popular, but a big report just dropped last week saying how amazing it is for people and for households and for equity. If you, for some reason, hate poor people, but you want to be fiscally responsible, you can hit them over the head with the fact that every dollar we spent on that came back to us like 3.5 times on other things we didn't have to pay for. And then reminding everybody constantly that this is socialist policy. So in this case, it was actually on DSA's national platform. And then also pointing out that this is harm reduction, that the only reason we need to have policies like this in place is the harm created by capitalism. And then you get to thank your conservative colleagues who voted for it, and then inviting them to join DSA, then making fun of them when they get upset and turn red. And then you get to badger the governor until he puts this socialist policy into the budget, as he did, and then you wait for it to be ripped out, and then you fight for it all over again. But no, these are real victories, and I think it's focusing on those smaller. It's not a small victory, but on those local victories, and then using them as a cudgel to get what you want on the statewide and beyond.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, next, Karen, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just say 2 things quickly. One is it's worth it to do this work. Like, I just think like creating these like channels for communication and collaboration between elected socialists is incredibly rewarding and really hard. So I can understand why, I know there are localities where there are multiple socialist elected officials and there's not really a level of coordination because it's really hard to get people swimming in the same direction. But as we've talked about, like, I think it really creates like an important level of support and strategy, and like you just can accomplish so much more. And like the chapter can learn a lot from the elected officials about like what it's like to be on the inside of politics and how to organize there. And then the electeds can learn from folks in chapter leadership about how to organize and what's happening on the ground. So that's one, is just like, you should do it. Definitely, if you have the opportunity and are lucky enough to have multiple socialist elected officials. And then the other one is sort of harkening back to what I said at the beginning, but you just have to remember that elected officials are people, and you have to treat them like people, which both means like, yes, don't put them on a pedestal, but also like they have particular interests, they have motivations, they come from different backgrounds and different districts. So like as organizers, like just treat them as you would like leaders that you're developing in any other space, and figure out like how to take advantage of their strengths and like what are the areas where maybe they need some support, which just, it means you have to talk to them. You have to have one-on-ones. That like, this is just like organizing your workplace, except totally different, but also the same. And so like building those real relationships with people creates like a safety net when things get really tricky, as they will in politics, because politics are tricky. But you then as like as an organization and as a DSA chapter have those relationships with people, and so it creates a foundation where you can like have the tough conversations and figure out how to move forward.
Thanks, Karen. Next, Zohran, go ahead.
Anna, would you mind restating the question once?
I'd love to. This is rapid fire. What advice do you have for organizers looking to build power with folks in office?
I would echo much of what Karen said. I would say that it is critical for us in office to have a compass that exists out of ourself and out of the institution within which we serve. And I think that that compass being DSA chapter, that compass being whatever mass movement oriented organization there is, it ensures that the purity of the goal that began all of this, to create a socialist project that responds and resolves working class crises, that can continue. Because if that goal is only held by the people who then serve in these institutions, know that we will be corrupted inevitably at some point, because you can only deal with so much before you start to give in. And the thing that stops you from giving in is if you have an institution external that is continuing to organize, that is continuing to hold you to account and also treat you as a comrade. But, you know, I think as Ryan was saying, when you waver, call you in. And I think that for me, that's why I would say it's necessary work, it's critical work, and it's work that can have great consequence for working people, because, you know, there is a deep need to organize elected officials. And I think growing up, I would always hear this argument of like, don't preach to the choir. But as I got older, I realized that the choir actually needs a shit ton of organization as well. You know, yes, talk to the other side, but make sure the choir is organized, because an organized choir can have immense results, no matter how big or small.
Thanks, Zohran. Darren, go ahead.
Got you. I carry with me 4 different philosophies with me every day. Or not philosophies, but just like reminders for me why I do this work. And it's from the organizer perspective. One, a dream means nothing if it's left on the pillow. All of the fights that we have are worth fighting, right? There's no point in us sitting and waiting for Superman, right? Superman's not coming. That's a common movement myth that has existed throughout history. that movements have been built on superheroes, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Asada, but really it has been built on working class people, right? Every time, because they didn't leave their dreams on the pillow. They fought. Kids, adults, our elders have always fought for tangible victories. Two, our fights are also long, right? Don't rush the process, trust the process. Great things happen over time. When I was in Public Allies, that was what was told to me every day in that process. And that's a philosophy I carry with me, especially when we lose, right? There's so many losses that in this space that I have to deal with every day. And they're not only coming from folks on the other side of the aisle, they come from the folks on my side of the aisle. And it's disheartening, it's breaking. And that feeds into that point that was being made by Karen, that we're all human. And we, everyone needs to take care of themselves and take the time that they need to thrive. I just got over being sick for like 8 days. But that's because I wasn't taking care of myself. I was giving my all to this work. I've been more intentional about reclaiming my time right now. And then lastly, a society grows great when we plant seeds for trees in which shade we'll never bask under. If we're not thinking about future generations and we're not thinking about the leaders that replace us in this work, we're failing. From the perspective of organizers, from the perspective of for any part of work that you're doing, if you're not planning for your replacement right now, and helping your replacement get to where you are quicker than you got there, you're failing. Not only yourself, but the future. Because at the end of the day, it's our children that will profit by or pay for what they become. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Darren. And I'll just be as quick as possible because I want to be able to get to all of your questions. I know we have a lot of great questions that you'll all have been posing to us throughout the program tonight. I guess what I would say is just one piece of advice is doing this work for so many years, I have, it's been a slog. And I haven't, I try to do what I can to preserve my own sanity and maintain hope, because without hope, you've got nothing. You're not going to be a good organizer. And I think, where I find that is through relationship building. And so to sort of piggyback off of what Comrade Karen just said, building relationships with your comrades, either in, fellow members in your chapter or directly with electeds, that's what's going to get you through the really tough times. It's also the people you're going to celebrate with when you actually win, right? And so I think that's really key. So I actually, that's it for our questions with the panelists. I think, or specifically for the panelists, now we'll take questions from you all. Let me see here. Let me see if there's some questions here that have been populated. Okay, cool. So, all right, so we're going to start off with this question, and I will have Karen start to respond to this one. So who are your closest allies in your elected bodies, and why do you work well together? And actually, Karen, if you don't want to go first, that's fine. I think I'm fine just sort of like having folks volunteer at this point about who wants to respond. So I'll just repeat the question really quick. Who are your closest allies in your elected bodies, and why do you work well together?
I can try to go first. I mean, just speaking, on behalf of FARA, I think obviously, in many ways are like the closest allies of FARA and the other socialist electeds are the other socialists, that there's like a sort of core there. But there also are other progressives, who many of whom were elected around the same time, who aren't part of DSA, and for various reasons probably will never be part of DSA, but they want to be part of a movement, and they want to, you know, there are many like shared values there. And, you know, I think a lot of folks have come in with this idea that like, we just want to like paint DSA on the front of everything that we do. And we still want to do that because we want to claim our victories, but it's kind of hard to win actually in the legislature if you paint DSA on all your initiatives, because for most people it's really anathema. So we have to build coalitions. You know, there are a lot of like progressives. I think one thing, you know, every state kind of has the like urban rural dynamic. New York has like the upstate downstate dynamic where you can do stuff that appeals to New York City legislators, but upstate legislators may not care about it. So I think it's been important for us to figure out how to like find commonalities with, since until this year, until we elected socialists from the Mid-Hudson Valley, Sarahana Shrestha, we had only electeds from New York City. So we're actually just trying to grow the socialist presence across New York State, but we also want to build like geographic alliances and like, you know, try to find folks who, for whatever reason, you know, really are motivated to work on some of the issues, you know, and surprisingly, or not surprisingly, some of the issues that we work on are like a little, are controversial, but some of them people are like, yeah, this just makes sense. So I think we also try to find the issues that like sort of have a broad popular appeal, and then try to bring people in through those.
Thanks, Karen. Does anyone else want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
So of course it's me and Ryan. We're two of a kind. We have an office bromance. We are called the Mancy, the Mancy defense sometimes. But outside of us, we have a really dope ally in Francesca Hong, who is just a true legend on the block, and probably one of the coolest, flyest dressing legislators you could ever meet in the country.
Yeah, and I think I want to put in a plug for Fran Hong as well, who, by the way, was censured for dropping some profanity on the floor of the assembly, which was absolutely justified. The profanity, not the censure. It's folks like her and Rep. Shelton and Senator Larson, who I think, yeah, during this first 100 days have kind of showed us where there are fights worth having. They've kind of showed us the toes that we could step on or not, and then letting us choose whether to step on those toes. And then they've really been great at being there during those conflicts, and even just little things like text messages afterwards, after we get into a tussle in committee around the floor, and saying, "I see you, thank you for being there." And it's been good. There are allies there that I didn't necessarily expect, but I am grateful for them.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, we're going to move on to, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So we'll just, we'll just like take volunteers from panelists to answer this one. Next, so it's one thing to try to achieve a policy victory. It's another thing to make sure policy is enacted, funded, and implemented without being obstructed by capital. So can you offer any advice or pitfalls to avoid in making sure socialist proposals become reality? Who wants to start?
Jump in on this one.
Yeah.
I think, you know, this is a great question. I was trying to get at this with my answer earlier about kind of the long journey of the debt relief that we won for taxi workers. I think one of the key things is to let people know that the fight is only over once the goods have been received by the working class. And so to celebrate the precious wins that we achieve, but knowing that we will regroup and come back and have the phone bank. We will regroup and come back and go to the office and get everyone that we need to get, you know, to hand in whatever paperwork they need to actually get it done. because so often we might win a policy fight and then it will be destroyed in implementation. And I think that, there are these strategies I'm trying to talk about. There's also the structural realities where an executive, can really handicap whatever it is that you're fighting for. And that, I think, speaks to the next frontier, is to have socialists be executives of larger municipalities and states, because so much of implementation is in the governor's office, the mayor's office, whatever office it may be. So we must fight like hell in the meantime. But I think, given that we care about not rhetorical victories, but ones that are actual in real life, that is also, I think, should be worthy of a future goal of our movement.
Yeah, thanks for that, and for providing that example, that concrete example for us. Does anyone else want to take a stab at this question? Okay, we'll try one more, and then we're gonna wrap up here. Okay, so what struggles do elected officials and staff face in terms of missing support or resources? And what would help them do the work of governments to more successfully build working class power? Who'd like to try this one?
Yeah, I think we touched on that with some of the early questions, right? It's offloading some of that research and advocacy and, bird dogging to organizations like DSA, like other stakeholder groups, because we can't do it all. And I think when folks are, stakeholders and stakeholder groups are invested in legislation to begin with, they also are then much more in tune with monitoring after it's implemented. And I think I've seen moderates destroy so many good things, either while it was legislation or after it was passed, that those are the fights we need to have. And we can't monitor everything that goes on ourselves. So leaning on stakeholders to do some of that work, both at the beginning and after it's passed, makes a ton of sense.
Thanks, Ryan. Anything else?
Yeah.
Anyone else want to? Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Well, for Darren.
Oh, no, you go Zohran first.
Oh, Darren, you got
Right.
what's it called? Mancy?
The Nancy Defense?
Nancy Defense Group. It is.
I mean, yeah, like Ryan was saying, we covered a lot of it. Paying folks equitable wages, providing opportunities for folks to be able to take care of themselves. I think there's a lot of expectations that staff carry to ensure that our offices are running the most effectively as they can. And we all know it's far beyond their capacity. To be able to interact with 100,000 folks or 55,000 folks, or even, respond to the hundreds of emails that we get daily, it's not tangible. And often folks who really care about this work, especially the folks we have working in our offices, they don't get real opportunities to take care of themselves because they're so committed to fighting on behalf of working class folks. So creating pathways and appreciations for them is one thing. And then I'm always going to go back to building class consciousness. I think at the end of the day, when you can get to, my goal is to get to a point where I can be like, at the drop of the nail, I can get even 50 folks to pull up at my committee and testify on behalf against the issue or on behalf of a piece of legislation that I'm trying to push, because it'll show so much of the solidarity and how intrinsically folks are fighting on behalf of the issues that directly impact their lives. I always say the folks who are closest to the problems are the closest to the solutions. And that's what I could see being the tangible victories that go a long way in ensuring that we win long term.
Thanks, Darren. Zohran, do you want to quickly try to answer this one before we wrap up?
I would just say, in New York City DSA, we've had a good amount of success. We have 10 different electeds now at 11 at the city, state, and federal levels. And I think one of the reasons why we've won those races is because socialist ideas are popular. And another reason why we've won those races is because we have very, very talented DSA members who have put together kick-ass campaigns and who have brought to this movement their capacity and fluency in graphics, in film, in in communications, whatever it may be. And so I would just say to people that we're also beating people because we are better at the same methods and tactics of campaigns and of the public argument around these things. And whatever skills that you have, bring them to the movement, increase the capacity of these elected offices and these organizations, because we know that so often we have the winning story, the winning argument, the winning idea, but we can't get it to enough people because we don't have the money that the opposition has. And so we have to tell it to that nth degree better and circulate it to that nth degree in a manner that is more compelling and accessible. And DSA members have those skills to translate that. I'll give a quick example. There were DSA members who made a scripted and shot this video about the New York Health Act saying, what if we treated fires the way that we treat healthcare? And we asked people for their insurance information before we stopped any fires. And they asked Jabari and me to be, State Senator Jabari Brisport and myself to be two firefighters in this video. And this video, did very well on Twitter, and it circulated to the extent that I had other legislators tell me that they had people in their office mistakenly retweet this, and then leadership texted them to be like, "Can you please not retweet that DSA video?" And they're like, "Okay, so they unretweeted it." But it's that they're not competing in the same kind of way, telling the stories of why legislation in a way that's easy, compelling, fun, kind of to what Ryan was saying, I think earlier about Ryan and Darren are these new fun legislators who are close to the compass of what is working class, what is important for the working class. I think we need to do the same, and it's DSA members that make it possible.
Thanks for that, Zohran. Okay, well, it is time to wrap up. So our panelists tonight have given us so much to think about and act on to build strong governing coalitions. Look out for a follow-up email with a recording of tonight's discussion and announcing upcoming events in this series. So check that out, make a contribution, and get involved in some of the opportunities discussed tonight. I would just like to thank everyone who's been involved in bringing this event together, all of our panelists, our co-sponsors, and all of you who've attended tonight. And thank you for your great questions and comments, and thanks to everyone who you can't see, who's been working behind the scenes. So that includes David Dualde, Brandon West, James Tierney, Sunshine Royan Lutter, and Max Shaw from the Democratic Socialists of America Fund. Look out for a follow-up email, like I said, with the recording of tonight's discussion and announcing upcoming events in this series. Check it out, make a contribution, and get involved in some of the opportunities discussed tonight. Thank you all, and I hope you have an amazing night. Take care. And solidarity.
We have to arrange a Wisconsin, New York City trip.
No, man. So